Good evening to members of the public. No press here tonight. I'm afraid the press officer is elsewhere. Right, could I have declarations of interest, please? No. Minutes of the previous meetings. That's the one on June the 22nd. Take them both together, and it was the Finance and Audit Scrutiny meeting held on the 26th of January.
I think I was the only one in attendance at that meeting.
I was in attendance, but I wasn't part of that meeting.
I would like to propose it, and I guess everybody else has to take my word for it, because it does need a seconder, or else we're just stuck here forever. Okay.
Is that both of them?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do for both.
Thank you. Urgent items.
Vote.
Sorry?
To vote.
Oh, sorry. Is all those in favour, please? Thank you. Next item, urgent items. We are actually going to take the internal audit, which will now come in as 3A. And welcome to Robin Pritchard, Chief Executive of Gateway Assurance Limited. Thank you. Oh yes, would you like me to introduce everybody as we go around? Are you sure? Okay.
So yes, I prepared a short cover report for the Block 2 report of internal audit. Apologies, it came out a day late. There's a bit of miscommunication, so that's another thing to do for us to keep our eyes on as officers. However, sorry, yeah. So the report, which hopefully you've all had a chance to read, covers Block 2 of the internal audit report. Previously there was a Block 1 report, and this is the typical kind of format. There's a number of recommendations that have been made and management responses in relation to those. I did note at point 1.6 that the progress report would be provided to the committee in a subsequent report. Hopefully this will be by the September report, when we'll have more information about the inter-authority agreement and arrangements with Cornwall Council. But to date, from just evaluating the management responses, under the key financial controls, 4 are implemented and 3 are partially implemented, and with the budget controls, 3 implemented and 1 partially implemented. And now I'll pass on to Robin Pritchard, who can take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, everybody. I wasn't planning to talk too much about the detail of the report, because I take it that that's been read, but I thought you might find it helpful to understand the basis upon which we compile the reports. You'll see in the introduction section, which is 1.1 to 1.5, that we refer to fundamental, significant and merits attention level recommendations. And what we're trying to do there is to bring to your attention and the executive's attention matters that we're identifying within our internal audit programs that relate to the level of risks that you've defined within your risk management system. So as a committee, what we're hoping therefore is that where you see red lights, you realise there's something important that we've found. Significant means attention has to be put to that matter. Merit attention, there's a little bit of negotiation to say, okay, let's have a discussion here as to what's in the best interest of the council in terms of taking this forward. What you'll then see is the opinion, which is in the middle box on 1.3, where we give 3 levels of opinion. So substantial means everything's fine, move on. Perhaps not even any need for the committee to be concerned in those areas. Adequate means that we found some things that need dealing with, and then limited is the one that you need to watch for, because we give limited wherever we've found what we call a fundamental red risk type type recommendation. So what that section there does is gives you an early warning system, if you like, as to where perhaps you should be focusing in what are 23 pages of detail, which are clearly first and foremost for officers' attention in terms of reacting to what we're finding. What we're trying to develop each year is an annual planning round whereby we suggest topics that we think are relevant for focus during the forthcoming year, and then organise our blocks of work into 2 blocks, one in the autumn and one in the spring. The early spring one coincides with the sort of end of year financial arrangements, so that we can have a look through financial systems at that time and feed any work that the external auditor is going to do later on in the year. I think it's probably worth saying, as I didn't make the meeting in March because I was fog bound in Land's End, that what we were really trying to do in the first year of our appointment was get to know the council and what was going on, and quite clearly there was an awful lot going on in the council during the 2 blocks that we were here. So what we tried to do was not interfere with the process that was going on, whether it was the external auditors or whether it was the Cornwall County Council representatives coming in, but to look at the feeder systems to most of the main systems and get to understand the procedures, and therefore hopefully come up with things that would help the progression that the council is clearly going to go through over the next months and years. In terms of significant recommendations, the ones that I would draw your attention to, and Bob might be able to comment as to whether these are the ones that have been actually actions taken place, are financial regulations. Clearly desperately important that those were in place for the 1st of April, and I think Diana has said that they were, and an associated scheme of delegation in place in order just to make sure that the appropriate financial disciplines exist within the council on a day-to-day basis. That then is supported by the recommendation in 2.10, which is about bringing a discipline into the financial processes, and we do that by ensuring that reconciliations take place on a regular basis. Clearly the intended involvement of Cornwall County Council should bring that one into a satisfactory position in due time. The next paragraph I was going to draw your attention to was really under budgetary control, paragraph 2.29. We understand that the reconciliations there have now taken place, and what we had identified were that the coding on payroll, so that's where your salary gets coded to within the accounts, didn't match where people were placed within the budgetary allocations for 2017-18. So that was effectively undertaken prior to the year, and now everything should be in place. 2.31 brings to your attention some observations we made with regard to the control of fuel. There's not big money involved, but clearly fuel can be an emotional subject if it starts to wander, so we've suggested tightening up controls in that area. Clearly we'll follow that up next time we're on the islands. We got involved in Five Islands School and gave some advice regarding the transition from Five Islands School to the Academy, and that's dealt with in sections 2.34 to 2.37. And the only other things that I was going to draw your attention to are within housing rents, where again we were picking up things within the budget planning process, particularly in relation to understating income in the budgets. Because if you understate income and then you achieve greater levels of income, it has a tendency to mask any differences in the expenditure side of the equation. So what we've suggested there, and again that one's been reacted to, is that we make sure that the budget for income in particular is accurate, and then as a committee you can monitor progress against that income level throughout the year on a regular basis. And that does link with 2.44, where we're talking about monitoring the level of arrears. And that involves not only monitoring and bringing effective information through the executive and to the scrutiny committee, but also in terms of making sure that appropriate enforcement action and follow-up is taken on a timely basis. The only other recommendation I was going to bring your attention to was within the airport, where we have suggested that in future the airport reverts to the previous system of making sure they've got a copy of the insurance documents for those with private planes. Just to make sure that everything is in order and that you are covered in the event of a disaster. I suppose 2.51, 2.52 are the tricky ones, because having taken the decision to implement car parking charges, you're now going to make sure that they're implemented. And good luck with that one. That's enough from me, but I would be delighted to answer any questions anybody's got.
Any questions from anybody?
Yes, just regarding the private aircraft. Do they have to email them or fax them through, or can they land and then show them? I mean, I can imagine it could be problematic.
Sorry, all that happens is once a year they produce their insurance documents.
This is for the people, locals really, as opposed to.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
yes.
Fine. And regarding the school, I must admit I'm not particularly in favour of the situation, but I understand the school's still, I put it, rather in a state of flux, and I think possibly the ball's in their court regarding the finance.
Is that the school or the academy?
No, for the Five Islands School.
We haven't moved to an academy yet?
No.
No.
It's
not as far as I know.
It's still, I think it's not gone as smoothly perhaps as it was hoped, but it's ongoing. So I think we have to wait for them to get their cards in and lined up.
In which case, clearly some of the recommendations that are within here in terms of monitoring that period and making sure you don't give them too much cash and more than they've actually spent are clearly important during that transition.
The other thing I would say is, mercifully, it does accord very, very nicely with the external audit report, which is just as well. That's supposed to be problematic if it didn't, so it's useful to get that additional confirmation of where we are and perhaps where we should be. Thank you.
Yeah, some of the stuff like the airport car parking charges would coming in, that's meant to be working now, and that's obviously not working now. Previous councillors said that they would, in February they agreed that. So where are we with, does anyone know where we are with that, or is that
think
just
they've been set at zero.
The car parking charges?
I don't know, I was joking. I don't know. And basically there is reluctance to proceed with it because nobody's sure if it's going to cost more to administer than it will garner. I think that seems to be the problem. And it's not been my area at all, so this is just what I picked up from Craig when he's muttering away.
Well, it'd be nice for Craig to be here to be able to answer that question and have a definitive, rather than council making decisions that's happened in the past and nothing's happened about them. I think we should be, if there's a decision made, then it should be followed through, really.
We've had 2 full council meetings since that decision was taken, so it really is remiss that a report has not been brought to members and that it hasn't been implemented.
Well, I think we'll have to speak to Craig, won't we? Speak to Craig and see if I can get some sort of statement from him on why it hasn't been implemented.
Going in the future, I guess, Robin, you guys will be working with Cornwall, because finance is moving over to Cornwall Council. So you will be, do you have an idea how it's going to work in terms of internal audit? Because they've got their own internal audit as well, and can you give us an idea of sort of what the process is going to be for the future?
We haven't had the discussion with Andy Brown yet, but in normal circumstances we would rely upon their internal auditors auditing their system and giving us an assurance report relating to the performance of the Cornwall County Council systems. We would audit those systems from your end, so we treat them effectively as a black box. So we'd be looking at the inputs and the outputs to make sure that those were correct from your point of view, to give you some assurance that they're performing effectively under the SLA.
Any more questions? The recommendation is that members consider the findings of the Block 2 internal audit report.
That is proposed.
Second? All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin, for that.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Now we come into agenda item 4. prioritising topics for scrutiny. I'd just like to say that the training we had with Anne Reader, was everybody here with the training with Anne Reader about scrutiny? I don't know whether you were. Yes, it was very useful, wasn't it? Yes. And scrutiny is really about making things better, and the clearer we are with our scrutiny, the better we'll become, I think. I don't know how you want to take this, but I would like to say that the finance, I think, is important, that should be one of our scrutiny pieces of work on the section external audit report and the section 24, isn't it? Yeah, if you could just.
Yes, sorry. The paper is about prioritising topics for scrutiny, and that's in line with the terms of reference S6, where items for scrutiny will be prioritised using evidence-based and transparent criteria regarding key decisions. It's very early days, clearly, for this committee, and this paper has been put together at short notice. So grateful for everybody who contributed to it. It's not been a comprehensive survey of all the committee. So essentially there is a blank piece of paper. We have internal audit that will be returning at a couple of dates during the year. But the other items where the committee will be allocating its time to try and get the most out of scrutiny. And the idea was there would be a relatively small number of items selected initially, and that would enable flexibility should other items come in further down the line. And as the chairman has identified, one of the issues around finance was the section 24 response letter that was written by the section 151 officer, and that outlines the members' commitment to implement those actions. And it would be, I'd agree, it's a very valuable item for scrutiny, but that wouldn't appear until later in the year, probably not until the November meeting. So it's, I think the report as it stands outlines a list of topics. The finance one added a little more detail about, particularly around the section 24, which is creating a very specific item for scrutiny where it would be quite easy to identify the scope for that and the outcomes and how that will help improve the council's work financially. And I leave it open to the committee to discuss how it wishes to take forward the prioritisation of the subsequent topics.
Finance, we've had a number of discussions about this over the course of the last couple of weeks, and in a way we haven't got a huge amount to scrutinise until the external auditors make the report, so we need to sort of kick this in properly in October, because the rest of the finance stuff will come to full council with budget monitoring up until that point, because I don't think we don't think we hit the June 30 deadline, so we haven't actually got a great deal to scrutinise that's hard, fast and concrete at the moment. So the suggestion has been that we leave it certainly with the section 24 until October, when we've got a proper progress report from the external auditors. I mean, but if anybody wants to do anything else, I'm absolutely fine.
Councillor Barclay.
Thank you. You won't be surprised that a priority, I think, should be transport. I know the council is not directly involved as a transport provider, but this community is, as you probably know by the signing of the petition against the operator taking out a judicial review against any competition, has been signed by 7,700 people, and it is a real topic of concern for the community. And I don't believe that we as an authority can undergo another winter like last winter, as far as transport is concerned, if we want to survive as a local community authority. Lots and lots of things are happening in the transport arena, and I think that Teddy has been a miserable failure as far as transport is concerned, and this council representing transport users and our tourism trade. So I believe that we should really scrutinise the work of Teddy and the Isles of Scilly Transport Board, and I have proposed in a letter to both the leader of place and the chairman of the council that the Isles of Scilly Transport Board, which is led by the council, is split into two. At the moment it comprises members who, in the words of the chief executive, hold the checkbooks. But it should be split into two, in my view. One part of it should be the strategic transport board. The other part should be concerned with operational and customer service issues. And I think that that way would stand far greater success of influencing the field of transport. I also think that the council should actively pursue the public service obligation and the area of support which is called area of social character. Assistance, I've forgotten what it's called actually, I talk about it enough. But
I think that's correct. Assistance of social character.
Yes. Which is a means of funding individual residents' transport, which it works very successfully in other places. So I do feel that transport should be a subject of close scrutiny by this committee. Thank you.
Any other comments on transport?
I would agree with Councillor Barclay about the importance of transport. I would be wary of rushing in too quickly on scrutinising that, because it's such a big, important subject. I believe that we should pull out all the stops and do it properly and do it well, and get as many look at the whole piece rather than just doing a quick item on it. I think what would be good is maybe to flesh out some of these topics in a workshop in a couple of weeks and come back with a more detailed work plan where we can maybe speak to senior officers as well and get their input on some of the background on some of the subjects, because some of us are new to the council as well, sitting on this side of the table, and don't know the whole story. So rather than commit now to a couple of subjects, I think some of the themes there, like transport, like finance, are part of a scrutiny committee's remit for the Isles of Scilly, but without a bit more investigation, maybe just amongst ourselves, then prioritisation I think would be quite difficult for me today.
I'm inclined to agree with Dan there. The issue with transport is very, very big, and we need to, I think we do need to define it. It needs to be bite-sized chunks, I think, in order to address it properly. To do it holistically, there was too much officer time spent trying to sort things out, because it's supposed to be evidence-based. And I do agree with the workshop, and I think possibly the way forward is to have a panel which actually specifically is looking at it, which I'm sure Marion would be very useful on. And I tend to agree with you with the Transport Board. The only thing I can really recommend from Transport Boards is they seem to just about work out when to arrange the next meeting, and the rest of it is largely irrelevant. I don't know what your view is.
Well, I didn't even know it existed actually at one time.
It's been so active. It's it's invisible and totally ineffective. But also, what was ineffective, and shamefully so, was the Transport Task and Finish Group, which was formed, must be between 2 and 3 years ago, which was meant, this council set it up to really address transport. Well, it failed so miserably, and it was doing exactly, Dan, what you have described, really looking at in detail. And we have failed in our study and influence of transport, time and time again. And
let's learn from that and try and do it right this time.
Yes,
so
but I think the idea of doing it in bite-sized chunks is probably a reasonable idea, but to do it the opposite of quickly, as you suggest, is just the same as ever was, and it will result in nothing.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying take time and set goals and do it right rather than do it slowly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Rather than, all this stuff sets out with good ideals, but we have to be able to deliver on something. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same situation, like you say. So I think we're agreeing.
I think Councillor Marcus suggested that we had a workshop on this, and I think that would probably be a good idea. I don't know what everyone else thinks. Harry, did you want to say something?
Well,
sorry.
I think freight obviously goes very closely with transport, although is separate. So I feel we should include that in anything transport related. I think, as is mentioned, it is a massive thing and of huge priority. So we definitely need to focus on it. A workshop would be a good place to start, but we don't want to put it off because it's a big job. There's certain things that we need to start on as soon as possible, such as getting the evidence that has been mentioned that is needed. If that's just a case of communicating to residents to relay stories with specific dates in, that would be useful at some point.
Well, I just want to say regarding timeline, we have a meeting, I think the next meeting is September, and that would seem the reasonable, that is for 3 months, 2.5 months, it seems a reasonable amount of time to actually bring something forward. I mean, it's not like it's 3 or 4 weeks' time. We should actually have something perhaps to look at with the next committee, plus with the workshop in between, and possibly set the panel up from the workshop. And I concur about freight, and it's obviously related to transport.
Could I ask Bob what he thinks about this?
I think in terms of officer resource trying to support scrutiny, I think having a very clear objective about what you want to scrutinise is going to be really important, and especially kind of linking that to the outcomes and what kind of improvement you can see that scrutiny can deliver. That would really help us from the officer's point of view. I think a workshop, partly with this being put together at quite short notice, as I think everybody, all the members have certainly agreed with the importance of transport, and I think it would help the officers, the workshop approach carried out in the short term to make sure that it doesn't get lost or stuck behind, but having that little bit of discussion to actually tease out what specific items within passenger transport, within freight transport, you would like to address, and then try and timetable those in relation to the other work. I think that would be really useful. If you are wishing to get on with the scrutiny work immediately following the workshop, I think the mechanism would be to delegate to the chair of the committee to basically set the work plan on the basis of that consultation, so that it then doesn't have to wait until the next committee meeting in September to be approved by the committee when you really just want to get on with it. So I think that would be if you're going to do a workshop, then it would be sensible to delegate at this meeting today to the chair to be able to set the work plan to enable the work to go forward, of whichever items it may be. There's an item of the transport side that would be good to take forward straight away, or it could be there's another discrete item to to demonstrate and get used to the process of scrutiny and report back and evaluate on that to see how that's going, because it is quite a new step for the council and the new processes that we're trying to put in place. And I have made reference before to a scrutiny handbook that was delayed a little bit, but that will be kind of forthcoming, and that will be for the members to adopt and improve as they see fit within the committee.
Robin, would you like to say something?
Just a thought. I mentioned earlier on we have an annual audit plan. I have made some suggestions for next year's topics already, and coincidentally, without seeing this list, some of the things that I was putting forward are on this list. So it might well be that you can use the internal audit plan to supplement some of the thinking that you've got in terms of scrutiny. And the things that we were picking up were things in the sort of performance management area that you've got on here. On our reserve list is certainly education post the academy. We've got smart islands, we've got waste, and those are the sorts of topics that we'll be discussing with Theo and Andy Brown as things that we could perhaps be looking at. So the two things could well come together to feed your agendas.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, when I said September, I meant actually have it all in place to do it in September, not decide what we're going to do in September. Yeah, that I didn't mean put it. No, I wasn't. September's not the stepping stone. September's the other side of the river, if you like.
Is that doable?
Well, it should be.
Well, it's about identifying the items and setting a scope. If the scope isn't, if the item or scope isn't realistic for September, then it won't be done for that meeting. But there may be other options within the list that are good examples to get going with the panel, say, between committee meetings, and then present that at the September meeting. So there are some of the items that are more in-house, for example, rather than where we're not the provider, where we may have to make a slightly different approach, whereas something like this one on here, the council inter-island boating expenditure, should be relatively easy to extract the financial information and the breakdown, and then consider if that actually the best way of delivering those services, that kind of thing. So that might be an item that could be presented at September. There may be a simple item that comes out of the workshop around transport, freight or passenger transport. But it really does need discussion to tie it down to a specific outcome so that we can then support you in that. Sorry.
Can I just
Councillor
say,
Markley.
some councillors have, on the subject of transport, which is probably the most pressing and desperate thing affecting this community, some members suggested that this committee acts like a parliamentary select committee and calls people to give evidence. And in the case of transport, of course, it would be the operator's chief executive and chairman, perhaps. I don't know what result that could achieve, because we could perhaps do a bit of shouting and make a few recommendations, but to me it doesn't really seem an effective mechanism. I don't know what other members feel.
Well, I think if we're going to have, if we're going to have a discussion about this informally, I think we could talk about that then. And then do what Bob said, that we could go through everything then, couldn't we? And have the workshop, and then if you can delegate to the chairman to set the year's work.
Can I make
and
a
then
couple
we
of
don't.
proposals then?
Sorry?
Can I make a couple of proposals?
Yes, certainly.
That we propose that the officer with the chairman organises a workshop as soon as possible to maximise the attendance of that workshop, and to take at that workshop we look at the internal audit plan as well. We'll get a copy of that, which will hopefully not persuade, what's the right word? guide us onto some topics for scrutiny, and then once we've agreed a work plan, we delegate to the chairman for the creation of that work plan and for the initiation of that work. Does that make sense?
Got a seconder for that?
Saying that's not too far away from the actual recommendation we have at the top of the page anyway. Broadly, yeah, members agree a list of topics they wish to scrutinise. I think that's sort of part of what
we haven't really. It's different because we're not actually picking the topics to scrutinise, are we? But we need to have a workshop as soon as possible. Bob, did you want to say something?
It was in relation to Councillor Barclay. I agree having a combative parliamentary select committee may not be very productive in some situations. And I asked the trainer, Anne Reader, about transport, and she's come back to me with a few suggestions. And I think they make very interesting reading, and I'd be obviously very happy to share them with the committee. So it does illustrate a degree of sensitivity and a different approach to how maybe we've done scrutiny in the past. But the select committee panels, all these options as scrutiny tools are all there for the committee. So it's about how you want to operate your scrutiny, how you think you would get the best outcome for the community, so choosing the appropriate approach, like horses for courses.
Could I ask that the Anne Reader's suggestions are emailed to members of this, or
It's quite lengthy, and I think to ensure that nothing's lost, it would probably be better to circulate by email.
I just say, I was one of the members who specifically mentioned the Parliamentary Select Committee. But I would say that you only see the shouty ones on telly. They do a lot of very extremely sterling work behind the scenes and recommendations to Parliament. But it was just really an example to take us forward. I certainly didn't wish to duplicate that system.
Well, we have a proposer. Do we have a seconder? Seconder? All those in favour? Unanimous.
Could you read it back then, Bob, the proposal?
The proposal is for the Chair, with the support of the officers, to establish a workshop as soon as possible, and try and maximise attendance to that, and also have regard to the internal audit plan, where they may provide some guidance to some of the topics, and we can also take some advisement from senior officers as well in relation to some of the topics. And following the workshop, members are agreeing at this meeting to delegate to the chair the authority to set the work plan on the basis of those discussions to enable work to continue immediately.
Okay. Right, part 2, reports for information, none. Part 3, reports containing exempt information, none. So close the meeting at 7:10. Okay. Thank you.
I have to shorten those recommendations from what I just